Hi, everyone. I am Chevonne Harris, founder and CEO of ThriveIN, and thank you all for joining us for season 2 of Lunch Break, which it is crazy to even think that we're on season 2. But Lunch Break, if you are new here, it is exactly as it sounds. This is an intentional 20 to 30-minute window that we are taking just to but also to woosah with purpose and to really hear from some women who are doing great things, who have done great things, and can really tell us how we can go out and live our best lives and secure bags while we do it, because it is very, very important. And so we have with us today I am so sorry, Dr. Erica Jordan.Thomas, founder and CEO of EJT Consulting LLC, and also Get Launched EB Consulting. Dr. Erica, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, we are excited to have you. I will go ahead and jump right in. For those of you who are tuning in, interact with us in the comments. If something is resonating with you, or you have some follow-up questions or something that we can give you more insight about after lunch break, use that comment button and chat it up with us. But Dr. Erica, for your first question, you have an amazing journey when it comes to turning your passion into profit. Can you share briefly with us your journey of how you transformed your passion for youth and education into this successful six-figure company, all while having a full-time job and earning your PhD at Harvard, soft flex, but not soft flex?
I love this question. So, it's interesting because I consider entrepreneurship in two ways. I consider it like the intersections of like all my areas of expertise and my zones of genius. And I also consider it to be like my safe haven, as a Black woman, like entrepreneurship is the place where I get to set the rules, where I get to create a sense of belonging for myself. And so my business, and so as you mentioned, I have two businesses, my personal consulting business, EJT Consulting, which I started about 4 years ago. I do principal development and coaching and work with school districts. And then I have Get Launched Consulting, which is a business development program for educators from marginalized communities to give them the business tools to grow a six-figure education consulting business too.
Awesome.
And so with both of those businesses, they really came out of a season of transition. And so with my first business that I launched 4 years ago, I was a principal, thought I was going to be a principal forever. And then my world was kind of shaken and turned upside down with a school board decision that was going to impact my school. And that led me to figuring out, well, what's my next step? It's the first time in my life I hadn't planned the next goal. And so I started consulting as a way to explore. And I was like, worst case scenario, this can sustain me until I figure out what's next. And I happened to also apply to that doctoral program that I ended up getting accepted into at the same time. So that actually funded my transition to leave my job and to go back to school full time. And then Get Launched Consulting was birthed in March of 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, when me, like everyone else in the world, I'm now at home with all this extra free time. And I had always had folks over the years ask me how they can start their education consulting business, and just felt fired up to be able to do something, because I had experience as a consultant where I would be working with lots of white men and not all of them worked in schools. And I was like, yo, like there's an opportunity for us to completely reshift and redefine who's an education consultant. And really the thing that's in the way is just access and knowledge of how to start a business. And so that's kind of like the movie trailer version of how both of those two businesses were started, with the headline being that it really came out of a season of transition.
Which, if there is no other season of transition that has unified us all, it is definitely this pandemic. I actually feel like I transition every day. I go from happy to stressed to give me a drink. I'm all over the place. But one of the things, so when I founded ThriveIN in 2020 of June, which we'll be celebrating our second anniversary coming up very soon, I had a full-time job. Thank you so much. So I had a full-time job at the time. And it was a very intense, one of those on the grind, took a lot of my time, a 9 to 9 type of job. And so what I found for me is that while I enjoyed and I'm working in my passion, By the time I sat at my computer, it's Saturday and I just want to chill and I'm forcing myself to show up and carve out this time. Or it was just such that tug of war of kind of my time and really my creativity and intellect to even do something on the side. How was that like for you starting business number one while also being employed and going through such a time of transition where just your head can just be in a space? During that, how did you manage your time? How did you manage your emotions? And would you do anything different looking back on those kind of when you were starting and building everything up?
Yeah. I don't know if I would, there's nothing that comes to mind of what I would do differently.
Okay.
There's nothing that comes to mind because it was just such a beautiful
Yeah.
journey for me.
Mhm.
If you ask me present day,
Oh
I
no.
might, as I'm building and continuing to build, I might make some things I would do differently. But
Yeah.
like those early years, like, I mean, to me, I look back on it and it just feels so divine how
Mhm.
I stumbled into entrepreneurship. And I named that, for me, I deeply believe in intrapreneurship, where you're working within an existing organization, but you're still building something from the ground
Mhm.
up. And so for me, this idea of building and creating was not new. I'm just now doing it within the context of my own company.
Mhm.
So, but to answer your question around the time management thing, I think this is something that comes up all the time, particularly
Mhm.
with my clients, because most of the people I work with in Get Launch Consulting still have full-time roles.
Mhm.
And I feel like oftentimes we approach time management as a technical like
Mhm.
challenge of like, how do I find more time on my calendar? Like, where is it going to fit? When I think it's more meaningful to really approach it as an adaptive task, meaning like there's an opportunity to really shift your mindset, beliefs, your heart around the fact that for me, entrepreneurship for me was my freedom blueprint.
Mhm.
And so the fact that, like, for me, I saw my freedom so deeply intertwined with the success of my business that for me, I made time because
Mhm.
for me, I
Yeah.
had this
Yep.
sense of urgency, this like fight or flight where, I would escape to my business. I found
Mhm.
refuge in my business. I found healing in my business. And
Mhm.
so I think that's the I think one of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we've kind of had a little bit of conversation around is we are socialized in this society when
Mhm.
you are so used to you only know a 9 to 5,
Yep.
you tie your freedom and your livelihood to someone else, to another organization.
Mhm.
And then the moment you begin to realize that actually you have the power and you have the opportunity
Yes.
to be able to control your own
Mhm.
destiny, that actually it's within you,
Yep.
that like there is this revolutionary moment that it's like, actually, if I don't spend time on my business, I'm losing money.
Yes. Yep.
And so like that's kind of my thoughts around the time management piece. And I'm not saying we're not busy. I'm not saying I wasn't busy. I'm not
Mhm.
saying other people on their entrepreneurship side hustling journey aren't busy. And I deeply believe that it starts with a sense of urgency
Mhm.
that you have for yourself around your freedom is yours for the taking.
Yep.
So you have a sense of honoring yourself, an obligation to be able to spend the time to create freedom for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, and I keep what I kept hearing was to for yourself. And so what that time looks like for each of us is very different. For me, in the early stages of my business, I was best productive when I had 5 to 8 hours. And so I would really leverage my weekends and dedicate that to my time. But you really have to think about when are you most productive? When are you most passionate and creative and ready to work, understanding that this is work that will fuel you, to do even more. So no, I love that you mentioned that because it's a different journey for everyone. But the key is to get started. Just if you
Right.
have an idea, get started. Get
Just
get started. Yeah. Side note, y'all, Erica kind of got me feeling real Willow Smith right now. I'm giving a lot of like,
yeah.
so just bear with me because this is like these are some really good gems. So the other thing with side hustles, and this was also something that I went through when I had a full-time job, was how do you tell a lot of your clients, especially because if you work in education and you're doing education on the side, education consulting on the side, some employers could easily see that as a conflict of interest. And so I have some women who I say, hey, what you do outside of your 9 to 5 is your 9 to 5. There are some people who may have, non-competing clauses or different things with their job. And there may be people whose bosses are literally just haters. And it's like, I want you to myself, and I don't want you to have any other dreams and aspirations outside of being chained to your desk for me. How would you advise, especially Black women, to navigate that? Because it can get tricky. And what I am often cautious of for women is being pushed to make a sudden leap when it comes to your money and leaving your job. Sometimes you have to do it, but if we can plan, I say the better for it. So, what is your advice to women who are navigating that, where it could be a conflict, it could be tricky, your boss just could be toxic? How do you get around that and still, get your business off the ground?
Yeah. Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind for me is, being really grounded and understanding the way that oppression works, right? So like oppression works in a way in which it will suppress the tools of freedom, right? So like and I feel like that's oftentimes one of the reasons why, us as Black women, we might be questioning if entrepreneurship is for us or not, because oftentimes in entrepreneurship spaces, the model that's held up is Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs. And like, when the reality is we're not them. And entrepreneurship is not a new thing for Black women, that it is actually historically in marginalized communities has been a tool of survival. Of we within our community, we are not new to being creators. We are not new to creating opportunities, to building power, to building economic wealth. And so I say that to say is that one of the ways oppression works is it will suppress certain tools of power. And I believe a source of power is information. Right. So oftentimes we in our heads, we can begin to create this narrative that there is more resistance than what there might actually be, because we don't have the access to the most appropriate information. So when I say most appropriate information, and you name this, is you need to be really clear in your employment contract of what's defined as a conflict of interest. So if you did not read your employee contract when you were onboarded, if you have not read it within the past 12 months, you need to go and read it. If it does not name anything in your employee contract around conflict of interest, then there is a conversation that you can have with your HR department to get really clear. And I would encourage you to get it in writing around how that is defined, conflict of interest, from the hands of your organization. Because what that does is that then gives you a source of power of information of this is how my organization defines it. And then you have a choice. At the end of the day, you choose what information you choose to share with your employer in terms of things that might fall outside of the conflict of interest. So there might be things that you're obligated to report. There might be things that, according to HR and according to your employment contract, you're not obligated to be able to share with your employer. So that's where you have a choice to make. So I think that's one of the things that I think is really important, because oftentimes in the education space, our fear creates, and not in the education space, it's just in general.
Everywhere.
Will create excuses for us. And that is one of the excuses I hear most often is conflict of interest, conflict of interest. I'm like, what's your employee contract say? Like, what's it say? Oh, you ain't read it? Go read your contract and go talk to your HR department, and then let's talk. So yeah, those are my thoughts there.
A hashtag read the contract, and feel free to amend it as well. I'm just saying. Okay, so another question for you. Whether you are a side hustler, contractor, full-time entrepreneur, however you define, yourself and your business, we know that especially with women and even with Black women, negotiations, they are never fun, but they have to happen. And it's tricky because on one hand, we are in a climate right now, and we get this from a lot of creatives and freelancers of my rate is my rate. Then for me as a business owner, there have also been times where I've really had to weigh the potential of an opportunity of, do I, take a smaller, a less than check, understanding that it could open doors. It's a risk because it may or it may not. I get a lot of people who come, and I'm sure as you do as well, and say, here are my prices. Oh, but can you do it for like 60% less? And I'm about to give you this. So how do you navigate that of when to flex, when to stay strong to your number, when to scale back? What is your approach to negotiation?
Yeah, That's a great question. And just to clarify, at the in terms of how I am situated
Yeah.
within my company, I'm
Yeah.
an employee of my company because I
Okay.
think we don't often talk about that enough,
Mhm.
or there may not be as much visibility as there should be
Mhm.
around Black women who are entrepreneurs and they're full-time employees of their company.
Yep.
That like, A, that's possible. I still have benefits. I still have a
Mhm.
401k. Like, I think that's one of the narratives that
Mhm.
oftentimes keeps Black women and marginalized people out of the entrepreneurship conversation, because there's this narrative of like, how do I pay myself? But what about my benefits? What about my 401k? I still got all that.
Yeah, put
So
yourself on payroll, and there are some tax benefits to it.
exactly. So in terms of how I approach negotiation, so a couple of things that come to mind is, this goes back to the point we were just talking about of like, information is a source of power, right?
Mhm.
And so part of negotiating and building your confidence in
Mhm.
negotiating is really being equipped with information. And when I
Mhm.
say information, you should have done your market research on, in the market, what is something given the services that you offer, what are other examples of what other people are charging in the market, so that way you have some data points to be able to feel clear and confident in where you land in pricing. The
Mhm.
other piece of information you need to be clear on is running your numbers.
Mm.
Right? So when you run your numbers, you know your estimated expenses, you are clear on your tax percentage and obligation, you have your target profit margin, you have your target salary. When you run your numbers, you are going to be really clear on your floor
Yep.
of, I cannot go below this number, because when I go below this number, I'm compromising either expenses, my salary, tax
Mhm.
margin, or excuse me, profit margin and or tax.
Yep.
That's going to help equip you with the confidence to say to know when to walk away.
Yep.
And then the third piece of information that I name that is a source of power when you are negotiating is, you should always know your client's budget.
Mhm.
And this, for me in particular, is, I believe in active equity of
Mhm.
organizations having budget transparency. Of, I will not sit down and write a proposal if I do not know your budget, because
Mm.
what I will not do is spend time
Yep.
that I don't afford. Like, I can't afford
Mhm.
to give my time away. I'm
Yep.
not going to sit down and write pages of a proposal and then find out that I'm not within your budget. I can
And
know
you
that.
gave them the blueprint in that proposal where they can go do it themselves.
Right. And so part of that is, there's systems that you can create in your business where you actually require potential clients to disclose that information, because it's an act of equity. It allows you to know how to move and shake, and it positions you to be able to negotiate better. The last thing that I'll name here, and I think this is a really powerful concept that I learned in a negotiations course that was
Mhm.
actually taught through the law school at Harvard when I was there for my doctorate. I was through the School of Education, but was able to take a negotiations course through the law school, of
Mhm.
the term that I think is really powerful. It's called Batna. And that's the acronym, and it stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Mm.
And so knowing your BATNA of like, what is, if this is where I come in at, of this is ideally, let's say it's 10K. If 10K is what I'm stepping into this negotiation with, what's the best alternative to the negotiated agreement? And so if they can't meet me at 10K,
Okay.
and am I willing to
Mhm.
come down at maybe 7,500, but you will share X, Y, and Z in terms of your email list, in terms of, you'll allow me to do a takeover of maybe your social media accounts. You'll make an introduction
Mhm.
to 3 or 4 potential clients. What are some things that have just as equal a valuable return on investment to the monetary benefits? Things that you could be negotiating that are going to build your awareness, build your audience. Those are things that are on the table too. So you could be negotiating money, but you could be negotiating relationships. You could be negotiating awareness. There are some people who negotiate board seats,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
there's lots of potentials, and that's where you have the opportunity to get creative and think about what makes the most sense for you.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, especially for those of us who may not be able to go to Harvard Business School. Those little tidbits, we appreciate it. And I would also say, for those watching, I can't underscore too, and we see this conversation happening now a lot amongst women, of talking about our salaries, but then also what we charge with other female entrepreneurs and just other entrepreneurs. You can Google your heart out, but for me, I also have a network of women who I can just text or call and say like, "Hey, have you worked with them before? Or I know you've done a project in similar scope. What do you charge?" Because it'll give you a very good benchmark, and it'll also give you some negotiating tools, especially if there's a shared mutual contact there. They can really help you through that. Because yeah, you have to get paid what you're worth, and we know that our intellect, our swag, and everything is worth so much, so much.
Completely
So
agree.
another question for you, Erica, is customer acquisition, and relationship building. It's a lot of times, especially with contractors, a lot of it can be word of mouth and referrals. And so for you, and there might be business owners who may not want to blow up their social media or do all these grandiose things to announce that they have a side hustle or doing some other things. They might be a real G who moves in silence. I'm just saying. And
Mhm.
so whether you are out there or whether you are more word of mouth with your business, how have you gone about really creating these great relationships with your clients? And I know your social media is excellent. Definitely make sure you all follow Erica, Dr. Erica, on social media. But what is your approach to relationship building and just customer acquisition?
Yeah, so I think part of so let me just name that, and Chevonne, I'm sure you have experienced this too, is entrepreneurship is a mindset journey, right? Like
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
it is not
Mhm.
a destination, it is a journey.
It never
There's
stops.
so much like unending mindset work that you will continue to do as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
And part of the mindset work that when it comes to client acquisition is being comfortable with visibility.
Yep.
And I found that that can often be a struggle for many of us who were socialized to be humble,
Yep. That
right?
Hi, I'm Chevonne. That was me. I feel seen. And
Right. So like we were culturally taught to be humble when
Mhm.
in your business that will actually cause you to lose money. And we
Absolutely.
also need to separate that stating your accomplishments and being really clear around the facts of your journey and what you have
Mhm.
done and your accolades,
Yep.
that's not lacking humility. That
Mm-mm.
that's stating your facts,
Yep.
right? And so
Literally.
I just named that is like one of the foundational like mindset pieces when it comes to client acquisition, because the first step of client acquisition is you have to generate traffic, right? And so part of generating traffic is being visible and building awareness. And there's many ways to do that. And you named one of the ways, which is social media. That's not the only way. So
Yep.
whether that's presenting at conferences, which is
Mhm.
another great way to generate traffic and build awareness. There's doing webinars, which is another way to generate traffic. And what right now what we're doing is partnering with other people to be able to do some type of conversation live, having partnerships. That's another way to be able to generate traffic. And so those are some of the things to be able to think about. And I think that there's also a little bit of mindset work that is underneath this too, of how,
Absolutely.
or another piece of mindset work of people thinking they can do something one time and then people are just supposed to come. When
Mhm.
it's like there's a level of consistency you need to have of generating traffic to see the acquisition you're looking for.
Yep, absolutely. And I someone had to tell me, a very close friend of mine, one of the best pieces of advice I got is that people will pour into and invest in you before they invest in your brand. And if they understand that whoever is at the helm is credible, is personable, and you can build that relationship, you are 80% more likely to get that chance. It is who you know and how you show up. Absolutely. Another question that I have for you, Erica, is Dr. Erica. I'm big on titles. I want to make sure I
Call
get
me,
that.
you can
You
call me
worked hard. You worked hard for that doctor. So I want to make sure I get that in there. How do you assess if a project is right for you? And this is specifically for a lot of our viewers watching who are consultants and freelancers. Everything is not Every opportunity is not yours to take. What questions are you asking? What are you vetting? And how do you, if you have to give that no, how do you give that no or put something on the back burner without burning a potential bridge?
Yeah. So there's 5 questions that I use that I gleaned from Lovia Jahi and Yvonne Orji. They
Love them.
have a podcast together called Jesus and Joloff. The title of the podcast episode is The Fine Print of Success. And in that podcast episode, they talk about the reality is when your business is growing and you are going through the glow up phase and things are starting to pick up and you're building momentum, you're going to hit a pivot point where your criteria of what you say yes to is going to have to shift and change because you don't have the same capacity like you did before. So
Yep.
they share 5 questions that I found to be really helpful of how to assess particular opportunities. One is does it meet my fee? The second is is it something new and exciting?
Mhm.
Does it put me, and the third is, does it put me in front of a new audience? The fourth is, does it elevate my platform? And then there's a fifth that is escaping me right now. But of those 5 questions, this is your encouragement to go and listen to the episode.
Hello.
You need 3 out of the 5 in order to move forward for it to be a yes. And so like those are the things that I think about. Like, so for example, I've done a TEDx talk. TEDx talks are not paid.
Mhm.
And so if I were to just go by, does it pay my fee? I would say no. However, it elevates my platform. It's new and exciting. It puts me in front of a new audience. Those are the 3 out of the 5 right there. And so those are some of the things that I think about in terms of how to assess opportunities. And when it's a no, I simply just share with folks that, this opportunity sounds really exciting. However, unfortunately, at this point, I wouldn't be able to move forward and say yes. Are you open to referrals? Because if you are, I can send with you a couple of people in my network who you should most certainly consider. So
Love
that's
that.
the way to maintain the relationship is you can make a connection to someone else.
And hopefully put another Black woman or woman on with
Right.
priority to a Black woman that you can put on if you can. You
Yep.
mentioned this before, and this is I can talk about some of this stuff all day, especially just the mental Olympics of being an entrepreneur. I mean, it can be by the hour, every hour, depending on the day. Well, how do you step away and recharge? What does that look like? And how do you just take care of your mental health while doing, these are big problems that you are solving and that you are working, to combat. And so what does recharge look like for you?
Yeah. So I've learned over the course of my career that is I got a little wisdom, and at the same time I recognize that I still have so much of
Mhm.
my journey to go.
Mhm.
So, I started my school leadership journey at 24. I became a principal at 28.
Awesome.
And so one of the things that I had to get really clear on is recognizing that I couldn't compartmentalize recharging and self-care, that
Mhm.
I actually had to blend the lines of what does it look like for me to be caring for myself during the workday or while I'm doing my work, so that way it's not this hard pivot or it's something that I can only do at these times.
I love that.
For me, what that means is I have to be really thoughtful of my boundaries during the time that I'm working. And so a couple of boundaries that I put in place for myself is, first, I keep my phone on do not disturb all day.
Mm.
So some people do it while they sleep. I do it all day
Mhm.
because I don't like to hear my phone ringing and buzzing and pulling my attention. That's one of the strategies I have in place.
Mhm.
Another is I don't take meetings before 10 o'clock. I
Mhm.
don't work on Fridays. I don't have any meetings on Wednesdays. The last meeting of the month is a no meeting week for me, just because I need time to myself. I need time to recharge. I
Mhm.
need time, open space for visioning, creating strategy and doing CEO stuff.
Mhm.
So those are some of the boundaries that I have in place during the workday. And sometimes that also means that I have to be okay, which can sometimes be hard for me. I have to be okay with when someone wants my help and wants to hop on the phone. I have to be okay with telling them, actually, I'm not available until next month.
Mhm.
And I'm super grateful I have a full-time executive assistant who can help block and tack for me
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that way. But but those are just some of the things. And I do spa days, I take trips, like things like that. And I have found that in order for me to fully be present to those things, I don't want to be running to those things when I'm exhausted.
Mm.
Like I want to be stepping into those things with excitement, with with rather than I'm ran down ragged and stepping into that, and it becomes a reliance. So those are some of the things I do.
I love that, and I'm gonna have to take some notes on some of those too. Because boundary setting is so weird. It's sometimes you just feel guilty
Mhm.
prioritizing yourself, and I always have to tell myself, well, that whole sleep when you dead is not cute. Yes, it is a lot of life out here to live. There are husbands and men to have fun with, and money to get, and you can
Yes.
enjoy it and create boundaries within it all. And so I love that you said that, and I really hope that those of you watching are really, will try and implement as much as you can within the life that you have for yourself. Really try to do that and cultivate a life where rest and recharge is a part of everything that you do, because that was so, so powerful. So we are almost at our time. And Dr. Erica, I would just love, you gave us a lot of gems today and a lot of things that we can just implement, whatever stage that you're at in your business journey. Is there any, final words, lasting advice, or anything that you would share to our viewers, particularly those women who may be new in their business, maybe thinking about having a business, or could just be stressed out by and overwhelmed by the thought or the act of operating or starting, a side hustle or a full-time business?
Yeah. I would say get really clear on your anchor,
Mm,
because you need to be anchored in something in this work
mhm.
as the ebbs and flows happen. That being really clear on your anchor is what's going to pull you through and sustain you through the ebbs and flows. And so one example of an anchor, if you identify as a person of faith, is being really really grounded and anchored in who God says you are and his promises to you,
My
right?
soul has been anchored in the Lord. Jesus.
And so part of that is like
Mhm.
moments when I feel myself getting anxious and wondering around things. I think to myself, Jeremiah 29:11, which I have tattooed on my foot, of like, for I know the plans I have for you, plans not to harm you, but plans to give you hope in a future, right? And so like that's one example of an anchor that will help, pull you through as you go through the ebbs and flows. And the second one that I would just share really quickly, because I think this is one that we need to be more grounded in as Black women, and I named it before, is getting really clear on our lineage and the entrepreneurship that flows through our bloodline.
Mhm.
Like we are not the first women to
Mhm.
build economic wealth. We are not the first Black women to be able to create businesses, and that we are actually owe it to ourselves and owe it to our ancestors to be able to seek our freedom in this way because of
Absolutely.
how they survived on our behalf, right? And
Yeah.
so I think the more we can really get grounded in our history and where we come from, that informs who we are. It's in those moments where it's like, all right, this is really hard, and I come from a lineage of Black women who know how to do hard things. So those would be things that I would just leave our folks with.
I love that. I love that. And again, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. If you are a woman of faith, that will sustain you. And if you see Dr. Erica looking at her foot out in these streets, leave her be, because she is encouraging herself. Dr. Erica, how can everyone watching support you in the work that you are doing as a next step? Again, yeah, what does support look like for you?
Yeah. So first, I would love for folks first to be connected on Instagram. And so you can find me at E_Jordan.Thomas. So that's my name without the hyphen, E_Jordan.Thomas. And then the second way is if you are an educator, a high performing educator from a marginalized community, and you're like, I think I want to do this education consulting thing, go to our website, www.getlaunchconsulting.com. Learn more about us, and if you're interested in applying, and if you work for an organization that would be interested in supporting other educators and being able to pursue their path of freedom, then you can support us. There's many different ways that you can support us, and so you can just reach out to us.
Perfect, perfect. And everyone in the comments, if you have a business, drop how we can support you, your email, your website, your IG or social media handles. Dr. Erica, I could chat with you all day. You are, I can tell why you are a doctor. Harvard educated and thriving in the work that you do. And we love to see it. Thank you so much for taking just a moment to just impart on us what has worked for you and how we can all implement that into our businesses and just go out and thrive in. To everyone watching, if you are not already, make sure to go follow ThriveIN on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. And if you haven't already, make sure to join our mailing list because we have some really exciting things coming up. And, you know, our goal is that we all just thrive in work and life and live our best life. So again, Dr. Erica, thank you so much and take care.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.
Bye.